Hi everyone, welcome to the presentation portion for the second public meeting of the Urbancrest Community Plan. Before we get started, I'd like to address who's been working on this plan and where you can find more information on it. First, I would like to recognize the Urbancrest Community Plan Working Committee. This committee is composed of local residents and business owners whose volunteer work has been critical to developing the community plan. My name is Michael Burris, the lead planner for this project from the Franklin County Economic Development and Planning Department. On our end, we've also had Jenny Snap, the assistant director, Matt Brown, our planning administrator, and Terry Barr, our planning project coordinator, involved with meetings and other pieces of the project. Finally, as a part of this video, we will have Carrie Reeds, the director of urban design and planning at Neighborhood Design Center, present some development concepts and community design ideas to help inform the conversation about how Urbancrest will look in the future. You can find all of the content that we discussed in this video online on the project's document portal and YouTube channel. The document portal has a comprehensive collection of the items discussed in this presentation, as well as documents from each phase of the project. The YouTube channel has presentations from working committee meetings and a recording of the last 2 working committee meetings. Here's the agenda for the presentation. We'll first review some basic items like the background of the community plan and how we got to this point in the planning process. Following, we'll get into the content you all will be evaluating, which is the plan's goals, actions, and maps for the future. Finally, Neighborhood Design Center will be presenting some hypothetical development scenarios and requesting feedback on design guidelines. To kick this off, we're going to cover the basics first. So what exactly is a plan? The Village of Urbancrest Community Plan is a document that will guide village leadership's decision-making for the next 10 years. The decisions made over this period will lead to results guided by the community's preferences for land use, how new buildings are designed, new park facilities, and infrastructure projects like sidewalks, bikeways, and roadway and transit improvements. The plan also spells out how the village can accomplish these outcomes and what resources can be leveraged to do so. Why is a plan necessary? A community plan will provide residents in Urbancrest a voice in the village's future policymaking. Community plans allow participants to tell elected officials what the community prioritizes. The plan also creates predictable and planned development. This helps to provide community investors like homeowners and business leaders an idea of how their investments could be impacted in the future. Where does the plan apply? It applies to the entire village area. This area is highlighted in the map to the right. The planning area also includes recommendations for 2 roads that are outside of the village's boundaries, Broadway and Lewis Center Way. This community planning process has 3 public meetings. In the first public meeting, we gathered data on likes, dislikes, and visions for the community, which we will review. This data was used to develop policy recommendations, and we'll go over these with you all to determine which policies the community thinks will work or not, and what is liked and disliked. We will use the results from this meeting to revise our recommendations, and then we will draft a recommendation for implementation. These will be presented in the final public meeting. To recap the first public meeting, it was held about a year ago and approximately 40 residents attended. Others participated in the process through online surveying. As stated previously, we used the results from this meeting to develop visions for the plan. We will review this data in the next set of slides. First, we'll go over participants' preferences on residential land uses. 3/4 of the survey respondents wanted to see more housing built in the community. Of this new housing, over half of respondents would like to see single-family homes. The other approximately 43% would like to see housing with more residential density, such as duplexes, townhomes, condos, and apartments. Finally, nearly half of respondents identified a need for different housing types through different phases of life. Here are the survey results on commercial land uses. Respondents generally thought that nearby commercial properties are well maintained, although almost 1/4 disagreed. About half of respondents wanted more commercial activity along the Broadway Route 62 corridor, although the other half had no opinion or disagreed. Finally, 2/3 of respondents thought that different buildings with different uses could be interspersed amongst each other along Urbancrest's Broadway corridor. On to the community's opinions on parks and nature in Urbancrest. Over half of respondents thought that there were enough places to recreate in the community. Most park users visit occasionally, although almost 40% of users visit more regularly at once or several times per week. Lastly, respondents unanimously agreed that Urbancrest parks and playgrounds are safe and maintained in good condition. Here are respondents' thoughts on community in the village. Most respondents agreed that they want to age in place, meaning that they would like to remain in the community as they get older. The majority of respondents thought that the community should have infrastructure installations with a consistent appearance that improve the look of the community. Finally, most respondents found it desirable to have access to local food and produce. Next, we'll review the survey data from transportation-related issues. First up, walking. Over half of respondents found it easy to walk around their neighborhood to commercial areas and that it was safe walking along roads. About 1/3 of respondents, however, did not think that they could easily walk to commercial areas or that walking in the roads was safe. Regarding bicycling, nearly 2/3 of respondents found it easy to bike to commercial areas. Few respondents agreed that it is easy to get to bicycle trails. Nearly half disagreed, and another 39% had no opinion. For public transportation, most respondents indicated that they do not ever ride the bus. About half of respondents did not have an opinion about whether there are enough routes or not to get to where they need to go, likely because they never ride the bus in the first place. Almost a third of respondents said that there are not enough routes. For those that ride the bus, 42% of rides are for personal reasons other than work, school, or medical appointments, with another 28% for work. Nearly half of respondents said that if the experience of waiting for the bus were made more pleasant through bus stop upgrades, they would use the bus more often. Concerning roadways, 3/4 of residents report that speeding is a problem. The bar graph below demonstrates the number of times a given street residents have reported to have speeding motorists. Based on the survey, community members perceive First Avenue, Central Avenue, and Augusta Street as having the most speeding. Finally, nearly 3/4 of residents find that roads are well maintained. In addition to polling on the community's current conditions, residents were asked to state whether proposed vision statements should be kept or revised. These statements are the visions that the community plan sets out to achieve. To achieve the visions, we have developed a set of goals and policy actions that we will present later. The first set of vision statements relate to community development. Survey respondents unanimously agreed that Urbancrest's small-town, country feel should be balanced with developing areas for interspersed commercial and residential areas. Further, these commercial areas should be compatible with the uses of their surroundings, and they should be people-oriented in design and scale. Continuing with community development vision statements, survey respondents indicated that they desire a community with a strong, positive visual appearance that draws upon the village's history. Additionally, in order to stay in this strong, close-knit community, respondents found that there should be a variety of housing options available to enable aging in place. Visions were also provided for transportation and infrastructure. Overall, respondents agreed that there should be bus service that is an attractive transportation option with sufficient routes. Additionally, approximately 3/4 of respondents agreed that there should be a safe pedestrian network for those who would like to safely walk around the village. Finally, residents responded to the proposed visions for parks and recreation. Respondents unanimously agreed that recreational opportunities should be made available to all persons of all ages and abilities, and that there should be adequate park and green space for residents to enjoy. This concludes the presentation of the survey results from the first public meeting. Next, we'll cover the goals and actions section of the community plan. In preparing for the second public meeting, the main question we were asking ourselves was how can we achieve the plan's visions? We developed a set of policy recommendations to answer this question. These goals and actions are informed by Urbancrest's current condition and the community's input on the vision statements. We will be reviewing highlights of the goals and actions from the policy recommendations document. A more in-depth set can be found on the document and video portals. As we propose these items, your role is to evaluate our recommendations. We would like everyone to feel free to provide us comments in the feedback forms, during the public meeting, or to email feedback directly to the project planner. We need consensus to make the best recommendations possible, so please be sure to participate. The first highlight we'll review for the goals and actions is to maintain Urbancrest's country character. To do so, the village should adhere to our proposed land use map, which is intended to balance development with small town character. The proposed land use will coordinate development in a pattern typical of small towns, with more dense development near commercial corridors and less dense single-family housing on the periphery. Community character can also be enhanced by having design standards. Many of the homes in Urbancrest have common design elements like porches, siting near the street, and garages behind the home, which facilitate community building and create a consistent neighborhood feel. Some examples can be seen to the right. New residential development can be required to incorporate similar elements to ensure consistency and design with existing homes. More stringent design guidelines can be required of developments that receive public funds. A second highlight from the Land Use Goals and Actions section is to revitalize vacant properties and existing structures. To achieve this goal, connect residents to resources that facilitate home repairs. When homes are subject to code violations, owners can be directed to local nonprofits for assistance with making repairs to the home. The village can also pursue corrective actions against tax delinquent property owners to strategically acquire parcels with overdue taxes. Finally, for rental properties, the village can implement a rental housing inspection program that can address issues arising from absentee landlords. Rental housing inspection program would help to ensure that tenants live in safe, healthy housing while also helping stabilize nearby property values because the rental is better maintained. The idea behind the quality of development section is to ensure that new commercial and residential developments are built to high standards. This can be achieved by requiring pedestrian-oriented site designs, placing parking behind or to the side of buildings, requiring improvements like sidewalks and bike racks, and requiring the use of stormwater management best practices like rain gardens, pervious surfacing, and parking lot landscaping. Additionally, support small business development. Small business development is a community investment that can generate tax revenue and a sense of place that makes neighborhoods unique. Generally considered, the Sense of Community section aims to improve the appearance of the village and build a local foods network. To improve the appearance of the village, inventory and commemorate historic places and enhance the community's sense of place through public art installations. Public art can bring vibrancy to underutilized structures or locations, instilling community pride and improving the village's appearance. The village's appearance can also be improved by installing landscaping improvements in high visibility locations and corridors. Street trees can be planted along key corridors on the sides of streets. They will not only beautify the village, but they can also help reduce speeding motorists and reduce stress. Finally, initiate a vacant lot improvement program. Poorly maintained vacant lots can be public health and safety risks, appear unsightly, and reduce nearby property values. This would include clearing underbrush and dead or dying foliage and cleaning garbage. Following, install small fences and landscaping as desired. The fencing, while not a barrier to access by people, discourages dumping. Similar programs in neighborhoods with large amounts of vacant land have been connected to decreases in crime and improvements in the community members' well-being. As mentioned, the Sense of Community section also sets out to develop a sustainable local food system. Producing food locally provides residents with healthy, fresh foods and can provide a source of income. There are a number of initiatives available to Urbancrest to achieve this goal. The village can permit gardening on its own properties that are currently unused through an application process. It can also permit residents to raise their own small livestock on their properties. Such livestock includes chickens, ducks, and rabbits. In order to provide an outlet to allow residents to sell their produce and livestock, the village should allow residents to establish their own farm stands as a given right as a property owner. Similarly, a farmer's market will provide a connection of food producers to consumers. An ideal location for a farmer's market would be on a vacant lot on the Broadway corridor. Another recommendation to provide producers a market for their fresh foods is to allow food trucks in commercial areas. Food trucks, like restaurants, would provide an immediate market for local producers. Food trucks have the benefit of requiring less capital to start than a restaurant, and they can bring life to formerly vacant commercial properties. The final action recommended to support a sustainable local food system is to develop a community kitchen and food hub. A community kitchen can host cooking classes to teach residents to improve their knowledge of cooking with fresh foods. They can also be a business incubator for startup restaurants, food trucks, and catering and manufacturing entrepreneurs. The housing section prioritizes developing more housing units and expanding the different types of housing in the community. One of the goals is to expand the amount of housing for persons of all ages, means, and abilities. This can be achieved through supporting land use and building code policies that enable aging in place for all ages and sustainable housing. In order to do so, more housing types are needed in the community, particularly senior and multi-unit housing. In addition, accessory dwelling units can help accommodate more residents. Accessory dwelling units are small dwelling units with living facilities separate from the principal dwelling, such as a single-family home. They can be attached or detached from the principal dwelling. Accessory dwelling units, due to their small size, are generally rented at lower rates than a typical one-bedroom unit. They can help homeowners generate an income on their property. Additionally, they are also frequently used to house family members, such as senior family members who can still live independently. The Community Plans Housing section also encourages infill housing on vacant land that is zoned residential. Infill can be encouraged by bringing new residents to the community and modifications to the current zoning code. To facilitate infill construction, it is recommended that the village reduce its lot size and frontage minimums. Reducing the minimum lot size and frontage requirements would help streamline the process of acquiring land for new construction. The plan also recommends that existing housing is improved rather than replaced. This would require connecting residents to emergency home repair, weatherization, lead and asbestos remediation, and accessibility programs. Finally, support the use of renewable energy sources, such as wind, geothermal, and solar. The village could consider incentivizing installation of renewable energy sources through waiving permitting fees. The first highlights from the community plan's transportation recommendations are for walking, bicycling, and transit. One of the main goals is to improve pedestrian safety. The planned infrastructure map identifies priority areas for sidewalk installation that the village should either construct on its own or require with new developments. Pedestrian infrastructure will make walking through the village safer, and it provides more opportunities for recreation. The proposed infrastructure map also includes a shared use path, which can accommodate bicyclists, pedestrians, and other non-motorized users. Secondly, make transit more accessible and install amenities that improve the experience of waiting for the bus. The bus stop can be made more accessible by building out sidewalks in the village and ensuring that there is an ADA-compliant route to the bus stops on Broadway. The experience of waiting for the bus can be improved with amenities like bus shelters, benches, trash cans, and shade trees. Next are the highlights for changes to Urbancrest roadways. Number 1, ensure that roadway infrastructure encourages following speed limits. Traffic calming infrastructure physically requires or psychologically influences motorists to reduce speeds. Street trees, speed bumps, like the image at the top, curb extensions, like the image at the below, lane narrowing, and radar signage are some traffic calming instruments the village can consider. Number 2, install a traffic light somewhere on Broadway between 1st and 4th Avenues. The best location for a stoplight would be determined through a traffic study. A stoplight would create safer conditions to make left turns into and out of the village, and it would provide a convenient location to cross the street for pedestrians accessing the northbound bus stops. Finally, improve alleyways. Alleyways improve access to properties, can have services like garbage collection located within them, or can be used more creatively to accommodate recreation like bikeways or gardening. The Parks and Recreation section of the plan sets out to develop new park spaces and more opportunities to recreate. One idea is to preserve some of the village's undeveloped areas as parks and green space. Please use the map to the bottom right as a reference. A thickly wooded parcel of land in southwest Urbancrest is an opportunity to be preserved as a natural space with walking trails. The village would need to explore options for its preservation with the current property owner. Additionally, a series of parks could be established on the vacant corner parcels along Augusta Street and the railroad tracks. These parcels should be landscaped and include walking paths or sidewalks for recreation. The park space would buffer the interior village from more intensive commercial and residential uses to the east. Landscaping these parcels would also have the added benefit of dampening noise generated from passing trains. Regarding recreation, the community plan proposes to expand opportunities to walk, jog, bike, or engage in other physical activities. To do so, collaborate with Grove City to install a multi-use path southward on Lewis Center Way to tie into the on-street bike path on Southwest Boulevard. Additionally, install sidewalks in areas identified on the sidewalk priority map, which we'll cover later. Second, adhere to the transportation map's bicycle facility recommendations. This action involves the installation of shared roadway signage and on-street markings to provide cross-village connections to the proposed multi-use path on Lewis Center Way and Grove City's planned biking infrastructure on Broadway. Third, install bike racks at public locations. This will allow for residents and employees alike to bike to the municipal building and parks and have safe bicycle storage. Finally, require that bike racks are a component of new or substantially modified developments. Next, we'll move on to reviewing the proposals for future land use and infrastructure. Regarding the land use maps, these are recommendations for how land should be used in the future. Adoption of the plan would not change how land is currently used with Urbancrest's existing zoning code. The transportation maps provide infrastructure recommendations for a variety of infrastructure installations, such as sidewalks, shared use paths, bikeways, traffic lights, and traffic calming. We'll review the land use map first. The map to the right is an overview of the recommended future land uses. We'll go over the land uses and where they're proposed to be located, and then we'll review how this map differs from Urbancrest's current zoning. To start, the yellow area is detached single-family residential, which is the majority of the village interior west of Main Street. The brown and tan areas would allow for a greater variety of residential uses. The tan would permit duplexes and single-family homes, and the brown would permit up to townhomes. This is concentrated near the center of the village in the commercial corridor on Broadway. High-density residential is colored in the map in blue. This use encompasses multi-unit developments, condos, and townhomes. This area is located in the Bending Brook area of the village along Augustus Street. The red area, located near Broadway, would accommodate interspersed offices, residences, and retail. These uses would be located on separate parcels and separate structures. The pink area along Urbancrest's frontage on Broadway is reserved for commercial uses only. The orange and purple areas located around the village's periphery would allow for large-scale commercial and industrial uses. Finally, the green areas are parks, natural spaces, and recreation areas. These are located in southwest Urbancrest around the Municipal Hall and along Augustus Street by the railroad tracks. So how is what we're proposing different from what's already in place? We'll review the four main areas proposed to change from Urbancrest's current zoning. The first area we'll go over is the area between the railroad tracks and Broadway. Due to this location's high visibility on a significant travel corridor and easy access from I-270, we're proposing that the area accommodate more housing and commercial uses. The land directly along Broadway is valuable potential commercial space, so it is reserved for commercial uses only. Moving westward towards the interior village, it is intended to have a gradual reduction in use, scale, and intensity to become more residential in character. Next, we'll take a look at the area around the municipal building and YMCA. This area is central to Urbancrest, and it provides easy access to community resources and recreation. To ensure that these community-based resources are maintained in the future, these properties are proposed to be reserved for recreational or other community purposes. Moving eastward, it is proposed to expand the land area where multi-unit developments are allowed south of the Bending Brook development. This was in response to surveying that revealed a need for more senior housing. In the village's interior residential area, the more dense residential districts are shifted from being spread across the village to concentrated along key corridors. The intent behind this was to locate denser residential development closer to key assets, such as transit and the YMCA, and to allow the village interior to maintain more of a small town feel. Finally, the proposed land use map includes some new park spaces that are not reflected in the village's current zoning map. There are multiple large parcels in southwest Urbancrest that are forested, and residents indicated that this is a valued natural area in the community. The area is therefore proposed to be a natural park with walking trails in the future. Secondly, a greenbelt of parks is proposed on the vacant corner parcels along Augustus Street. As mentioned earlier, this is intended to be landscaped to screen the interior village from the more intensive commercial and residential uses across the railroad tracks, and this would serve to dampen noise generated from the passing trains. Next, we'll move on to infrastructure maps with proposed future sidewalks first. Based on survey data, the community had mixed feelings on sidewalk installations. To meet both sides in the middle, we've proposed sidewalks to only be located in strategic areas of the village. 2 sidewalk corridors are proposed along First and Central Avenues, the main thoroughfares through the village. It is also proposed to connect the Bending Brook development by sidewalks to the First Avenue sidewalk. These routes will improve connectivity to community assets, nearby commercial areas, and to transit stops. These areas should be the village's primary priority to install. East of the railroad tracks, sidewalks are proposed on all streets to complement the proposed more dense residential uses and commercial uses to create a more walkable environment. These are considered to be of secondary priority and could be built as the area develops. Moving on to proposed bikeways. A shared use path, the Blue Line, is proposed to connect the village to Grove City's bike lane on Southwest Boulevard. Shared use paths accommodate various modes of non-motorized transportation and are separated from the road. A shared use path is beneficial in this location to separate cyclists, walkers, and other users from the industrial truck traffic on this road. A signed shared roadway in the brown lines is proposed to span across the village. These are routes designated with signage and sharrows, where bicyclists and motorists share the road. This will create a bike route through the village that connects to Grove City's existing and planned bicycle infrastructure on both sides of Urbancrest. Finally, we'll review proposed changes to the village's roadways. The red lines are platted alleys that are in need of improvements. Alleys provide increased access to properties, alternate routes in the event of roadway blockages, and can be used for locating municipal services like garbage collection. The green line on Broadway indicates a corridor for stoplight installation. A stoplight in this area would create a safer place for pedestrians to cross Broadway and allow for safer turns into and out of the village. The specific intersection would be determined through a traffic study. The brown lines on First and Central Avenues are areas identified for traffic calming installations. Thinking back to the beginning of this presentation, these 2 streets were reported by residents to have the most speeding in the village. Traffic calming can take the form of curb extensions or speed humps, which reduce speeds by forcing motorists to slow down for safe navigation. Finally, the transit network. No changes are proposed to the Coda number 3 route, although it is proposed to make improvements to the bus stop central to Urbancrest. These improvements, such as shelters, benches, and shade trees, are intended to improve the experience of waiting for the bus. Next up, I'll turn the presentation over to Kerry Reeds from Neighborhood Design Center. He will be presenting some hypothetical examples of what new developments could look like in Urbancrest. Take note of your likes and dislikes. Your preferences will help us make design recommendations for future infrastructure and development.
This is Kerry Reeds with the Neighborhood Design Center, here to discuss the plans that we've been developing for the village of Urbancrest. The first plan that you see before you is kind of an overall view of the village, being delineated by a red dashed line around the perimeter. We've got 3 primary study areas. The first, development area A, kind of upper right-hand corner, bounded generally by First Avenue and Augustus. The second, more in the southwest quadrant or southeast quadrant. Area B, bounded generally by 4th over to Summit and on the west Wallace Street. And then finally, Area C, kind of the southwest corner, bounded generally by Maple and Main and to the north 3rd Avenue. The second plan illustrates a couple of options for Area A. In the left-hand corner of the sheet, you'll see a combination of single family and duplex. You'll note several of the plans we'll go through. I should mention there's a legend in the upper left-hand corner of each plan which delineates the use by color. So again, this plan assumes, to be fair, that there's nothing there now, and I know there is, but if it were a clean slate, this is one way that this area could redevelop. Access is provided from Augustus Street primarily. There's two roads that come in. We've delineated a small neighborhood green kind of to the western part. You'll also note that there is an alley system that serves these lots. No street access. You could have visitor parking, obviously, at the front, but I think that would certainly add a lot to the pedestrian friendliness of this if it were to develop in this manner. To the right is another approach, being a senior housing facility that's more inbound. This would be a 3-story building. It's plus or minus 75 units. Primary access for visitors would be from First Avenue. As you can see, coming north off of First, there is a roundabout to drop people off. Parking would be more to the east of that. And then along the perimeters of First Avenue and Augustus, we're showing infill townhome. We're illustrating a combination of triplex, fourplex. I think there's 1.5 in there. That could be any combination of that. So that's that plan. The next plan in this series, this is page 3, illustrates a combination of 3 types of housing: single family, duplex, and townhome. You'll note that on this plan, we do acknowledge the existence of existing housing, both along Augustus Street and First Avenue. Similar to the previous plan, primary access would be from Augustus Street, kind of right across the street from Mayor's Park. Again, there's a centralized green and an alley system that would again service the lots, and then we would tie into areas to the south as well. I should mention that the townhome, that could in fact be single family or duplex as well, does not have to be townhome, but there's just an option depending on what the housing needs would be. The next plan is moving down to development area A. We've got 4 different types of development that are occurring here. Kind of on the right-hand side, you'll notice two retail buildings that face Broadway. Parking would be held behind as well as to the west off of 4th Avenue. Immediately to the south of that is a office building. I recognize that there is a car wash there now, which certainly could remain, but at some future date, if that goes out of business or this would be considered a higher, better use, you could fit a 1-story office building in that location. That's about an 8,000 square foot building. And again, the parking would be held just to the west of that. Along 3rd Avenue, moving west, we've got some townhomes first, and then across the street from existing homes to the north, we've got single family homes. And then behind that face 4th, we're showing some townhomes there, a townhome and an open lot on the south side of 4th. And then at the extreme west, we've got a small green that's been created. Wallace's, it makes the turn, or rather 4th to Wallace's, it makes the turn. We've created kind of a small green for the units that would face due west. It would be kind of a difficult corner to use otherwise. So I think it's an opportunity to introduce some measure of open space there. Back to the commercial facing Broadway. You'll notice that, again, the parking is held back. That's intentional, that the buildings would be held closer to the street. I think it would be a better streetscape experience. We've got another option here momentarily, but we'll show another way of looking at that. On the next sheet, it's quite similar actually to the previous sheet. Probably the biggest difference is again, the nature in which the retail along Broadway, we've got 2 buildings illustrated. One that definitively faces Broadway. The other one kind of wraps the corner and faces south to 4th. The biggest difference, again, is that the parking, this is a bit more typical today, where the parking would be held in front of the building, between the street and the building. We could talk about screening a little bit later in the presentation. Again, to the south of that, still an office building, infill townhome on the south side of 4th. Probably the biggest difference is on 3rd Avenue. Instead of single family, we're delineating on the existing vacant lots that could be duplex. I should mention that for the previous plans, I might have mentioned, but certainly for this one, I think that single family and duplex are somewhat interchangeable, and we've got some precedent examples later in the presentation that I think will illustrate that point. Moving now to Area C, kind of in the southwest corner of the village, we are illustrating a potential park. Fairly simple layout. This is a wooded site, so pretty much the southern two-thirds would remain wooded. We're illustrating a perimeter path that would be accessed from Maple Street, and then proceed around the entire park. We're showing a open shelter that's about a third of the way down that would kind of align north-south. You'll see a multi-purpose field that would intentionally just be turf and trees, so it could be for pickup frisbee, dogs, football game, baseball with no backstop, just kind of general light recreation. And then a small parking lot that would be located at 4th and Maple, just to the north of the church. And then a kind of a perimeter fence delineating this as a public open space. And we've got some precedent examples of what that could look like just a little bit later in the presentation. The next page is a SketchUp model. This is on 3rd Avenue, looking east towards Broadway. So this is really not intended to be so much about architectural style, but rather just what the massing and the general character would be of infill as these vacant lots came in. So as you can see, this plan, or this view rather, is illustrating what it would look like to have a tree lawn and a sidewalk, a public sidewalk behind that, and then obviously walks to go to individual units. So a little bit different in character than what's across the street, but I suppose long term, if it were desired, sidewalks could certainly be added to the existing homes that are on the north side of 3rd Avenue. The next plan is another SketchUp model. This is an aerial looking predominantly between 3rd and 4th. So again, this is not intended to be necessarily about architectural style, although I will say that these are illustrating a 2-story unit throughout. You can see at the far end of the illustration the commercial buildings, retail along Broadway, and then just to the right of that, the 1-story office building. And in the foreground, behind the tracks, you can see, as I think I mentioned earlier, we were looking at this plan view of what it would appear like if you were actually to create some sort of public green space between the tracks and those units immediately to the east. But again, you will also notice, as you mentioned, as opposed to the previous image, we're illustrating a sidewalk on the north side of 3rd, again, tree lawn on both sides of the street, and then public sidewalk along all new development. Moving now to some precedent imagery, we've got a series of these. The first one that's on your screen now is for single family. We've got kind of different characters. This again is not really intended to necessarily be about architectural style, but about placement and how parking is arranged. So the upper left recognizes this is a very modern expression of the house. But as you can see, just off to the right, this is intended to be not so much, again, about style, but that this would be a driveway served off the public street, whereas the image immediately to the right, precedent number B, is single family. You can see a public sidewalk and a tree lawn, but what you don't see is any driveway. So this is just kind of giving an idea of what it would look like if the infill single family were alley loaded as opposed to having driveways at every house. Moving to the right now to option C, this is a 1-story ranch infill. We recognize that there needs to be some measure of or addressing aging in place, and 2-story homes obviously offer a lot of challenges as it relates to that. So it might be appropriate that some of the infill over time is actually a 1-story unit. Moving down to the lower left, again, another single family, kind of a cool style, at least for me personally. But again, the intent of this is these are obviously these are smaller houses. I think they're quite handsome. But again, this is really more about placement, and that you can see these would all be loaded from a public street, so everyone would have their own driveway. And then on the right of that, again, not so much about style, but the intent of this is that these would be alley loaded, and just an idea of what that could look like. And then finally, on the lower right, another ranch version. I should have mentioned that the option C above, although it didn't have a complete street view, the intent of that was that you can have obviously a infill ranch that's alley loaded. The one in the lower right below C, again, is more of a traditional driveways at every house, and obviously a garage door in the foreground. Moving on to duplex now, we've got 4 examples in the upper left on A. Again, this would be, the intent of this would be alley loaded as opposed to the one in the upper right, option B. This is actually a shared driveway where you would drive between the buildings, and you can see a garage kind of in the background of what that would appear like. Option C, certainly more traditional in character, again, but is implying that this would be alley loaded. There's no driveway that you can see that you would be passing between units. And then finally, in the lower right, this would be a duplex, ranch style duplex. Again, no driveway, so the intent of this would be put to the back. I think one thing that the plans that we looked at earlier really don't express is if you went with a ranch duplex, I think you would certainly need a wider lot in all likelihood to do that. Certainly if you had driveways, but what we were illustrating is probably a little bit skinnier and deeper unit that would fit on a 50-foot single family lot. But again, if we went to a ranch, it's possible that the lots would need to increase in size just a bit. Moving on now to multi-unit attached housing precedents. These are all kind of similar. I think the one thing that they have in common is you will note that there are no driveways passing by, that these are, I would say, generously set back from the street. So you've got a generous tree lawn, and then behind that, a lawn, potentially a garden, as seen in illustration B. Again, these could be a combination of 2-plex, 3-plex. They could go up to 5. So again, it's not really about how many units there are attached, but just what's the character and what's the massing. The one in the lower left, I would almost call that workforce housing, very cute, triplex. I think this example is actually out of Colorado. And then the example in the lower right, again, I guess a bit more of a modern / traditional, but again, the intent is that these are just how they're placed on the site and how they would address the public street. Moving on now to frontage precedents. I should mention that these are really intended to be what could potentially happen along Broadway. In the upper left, for those of you that are familiar, this is actually taken from Easton, a very simple approach with a brick pier and evergreen hedge. As you can see, the parking is held back some distance from the public street. In the upper right is a brick wall with plantings. This is actually East Main Street in Reynoldsburg. Another part of this that you really can't see in this was part of a general curb consolidation. So again, it's segments of low brick wall, a whole lot of daylilies, and then street trees, but again, a public sidewalk. And I think it turned out quite well in terms of screening parking. On the lower left, that is East Main Street in Bexley. So if you recall, one of the examples in area B was what if the buildings were held closer to the street and you did not have a parking lot between the public street and the building itself. So this is obviously illustrating a restaurant, so exterior seating. So you've got a low stone wall, decorative railing, plantings, again, with this held back behind a public sidewalk. And then finally, the lower right-hand corner, example D, this is from Grandview Yard. This is probably the most over-the-top one. I mean, it's handsome, but there's a lot going on. You've got primary signage for the development, stone wall, again, public sidewalks, in this case, brick, lots of landscaping and lighting. The next page shows some fencing precedents. Again, this would be predominantly as it relates to public open space. If you recall from Area C, I had mentioned that more to the northern part of that park plan, that there would be some type of fencing that would delineate that as it's public property. So in the upper left, I think it's quite handsome, metal post and rail, fairly simple expression. In the upper right is a wood post with a round steel pipe rail. Lower left, very traditional wood posts and 4-rail simple fence. And in the lower right, kind of a chunkier, beefier expression, lower, but still certainly does the job. Probably at least a 6x6 post, and then a stouter twin rail that would run between those posts. Lastly, we'd like to talk about some lighting precedents. So as you can see in the upper left and right, those are two different types of, I would certainly describe them as decorative, but more of a residential scale. There are a lot of different types, but I think more of a traditional, what I would define as traditional, might be more appropriate, but it could certainly go more modern. Again, those would be intended if there were public lighting along interior streets. Then this is again more about the scale of the lighting that would occur there. And then the lower left and right, I'm calling that commercial scale lighting. That's intended to be along Broadway. So I believe there are existing wood poles and cobra heads. So this is just something to think about longer term if there was something that was more unique to Urbancrest. And again, the lower left-hand corner, any pole really can be specified to accept banners. So that's another way to kind of brand Urbancrest. And I should mention that on the primary east-west streets that come off of Broadway, that's a possibility for select streets, even within residential areas. Thank you very much for your time.
So thanks to Carrie for making that presentation. To recap what we've covered, we reviewed the survey results on the village's current conditions and vision statements from the first public meeting, the goals and action steps to achieve the recommended policies, proposed land use and infrastructure maps, and conceptual development illustrations. These will all be items open for discussion during the second public meeting. So that leads us to what's next in the planning process, which is the virtual public meeting. Unfortunately, we can't meet in person at the time due to COVID-19, so we'll have to meet virtually using Zoom to host the meeting. This meeting will be held on Thursday, September 3rd from 3:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Also, please be sure to complete both the policy recommendations and design concepts feedback forms. These were distributed throughout the village, but you can also complete them online at the provided link. For those using the paper feedback forms, they can be dropped off at the Urbancrest Village Hall. Finally, if you'd like to review the project in greater detail, please visit the Community Plans document and YouTube portals. Those can be found at the links at the bottom of the slide. Thanks everyone for watching, and be sure to contact me at my email address below if you have any questions or comments. Take care, and we hope to see you at the virtual public meeting.